Hamas has always been at odds with the Israeli government. That subjugation of the Palestinians is what formed Hamas. That's where it was born.
What was your whole read if we zoom out on this attack on the 7th?
Hamas is just a proxy. They're just a piece of a much larger puzzle that connects Iran to Hamas and connects the BRICS to Iran and connects Russia and China and all of the major players that stand opposite to the United States.
So was there an intelligence failure?
I still stand by this was a successful sneak attack and not an intelligence failure. We're actually dealing with a scenario here where this entire attack could have been coordinated in live conversations where people were literally meeting in street corners on scratched pieces of paper that other people had to burn. We're talking about old school sticks and bricks, real Cold War era intelligence and espionage activity. Iran wanted to do something that was going to instigate Israel in such a way that Israel's response would be so overboard that the whole world would wake up to the fact that Israel is an oppressor and the United States backs Israel with total and complete hypocrisy to their policies anywhere else in the world.
But Andrew, I mean, what is Israel supposed to do?
Israel had the opportunity to immediately see what this was for what it was. This was an instigated terrorist plot designed to cause upheaval in Israel and cause upheaval in Israel's relationships with other Western countries. 2/3 of all the casualties in Gaza have been women and children. How is the United States supporting that? If we just stop trying to police the world will burn. And when the world fights itself and we're the only ones left to be strong, the world is our oyster again. But when we're trying to police the entire world, we're just depleting our own resources. And we're giving an opportunity for someone else to let the world burn. And that's exactly what BRICS is doing. In essence, they're like, yeah, let the world burn. And we'll be here to sweep up the ashes.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
Hi, it's Brian Rose from London Real. You probably know that we've just recently been re-platformed on YouTube after 25 months completely in the dark. The truth is, I really need your help. What I really need you to do is click on that subscribe button right now, like this video, and maybe even leave a comment or share the link with friends. We're really fighting against an algorithm that's tried to keep us quiet for so long. And the more subscribers we have, the more people watch our content, the better guests we can bring you, the better content, and we can continue transforming lives. We've been doing this for 14 years now. I want to do this for another 14 years, but I really need your help. So click on that subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment, share this, and we're going to continue to bring you more and more great content. Thank you. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Andrew Bustamante, the decorated U.S. Air Force combat veteran, former CIA intelligence officer, author, and award-winning speaker. In 2007, you became the youngest U.S. Air Force officer in history to command 200 nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles from an underground bunker with the highest security clearance possible. You then spent the next 7 years working as a covert operative for the CIA, assuming numerous identities and working undercover to foil terrorist plots and steal foreign secrets. Today, you use those same mental, physical, and social spy skills you learned at the CIA as a private intelligence consultant. You believe that Iran was behind the Hamas attack on October 7th and that the subsequent bloodbath in Gaza will only stoke outrage across Muslim nations. Andrew, Welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me. And, dude, it's one of the worst jobs in the world to be the one that sees what's going to happen, only to then watch it actually happen. And I'm really happy to be here with you and to talk about anything and everything that's relevant to our world.
Well, look, let's jump into it there. First of all, it was great when you were here in studio a year ago, and it's always great talking to you, and love to see your rise across so many media channels, and we'll talk about that. But, you came out with an amazing video, I think it was October 8th or 9th, where you were saying from an intelligence perspective what either did or didn't happen in Israel. Was it an intelligence failure, or was it just them being outsmarted? And you just said now when we opened that it's hard for you sometimes to see what's about to happen and then actually see it happen. Is this something that you knew was going to happen? We've now heard articles coming out in the New York Times that the CIA knew about this a week before or days before. What was your whole read if we zoom out on this attack on the 7th?
So it's important to understand that Hamas has always been at odds with the Israeli government, right? The whole idea of the Palestinian plight, specifically in the Gaza Strip, that subjugation of the Palestinians is what formed Hamas. That's where it was born, right? It is a resistance group. It's not that different from what happened in the United States during the American Revolution, right? The oppression became so great that an organization was created to combat the oppression. That organization was Hamas. So it was never a matter of it was never a matter of if Hamas would attack. It was always a matter of when and how. And it's a question of when will they have the right combination of opportunity, timing, and funding, because one of the things that Hamas in Gaza doesn't have is any internal tax base. It can't create its own standing army. It can't create its own professional systems. It can barely keep its people alive. And that's the same thing happening in the West Bank. So when we look at the conflict that's happening right now between Israel and Palestine, it's not a fair fight. It's not even close to a fair fight. It's an oppressive force, the Israeli government, continuing to exert their oppression against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strait, right? And it's frustrating and it's sad because we forget that it's even there, right? It's been happening for decades, and most of the time the rest of the world forgets that it's happening. But the Muslim world is very, very aware of it. It's just that most of our first world countries, our wealthy Western countries, are either anti-Islamic, like you see across Europe, or ambivalent to the plight of the Muslim, which is what you see in the United States and most of Canada. So to us, that conflict, we're blind to that conflict, but it's always been there. So was anyone able to predict what was going to happen on October 7th? I wouldn't say anyone could predict that it would happen on that day. But a big part of why it was so difficult to predict was because everyone knew something would happen at some point. We just didn't know if it would be October 7th or December 7th or, March 7th, 2024. It's one of those, it's like a pot that boils over. You see it boiling, you just never know when it's actually going to spill over the lip.
Now, one of the comments of why this attack was so successful is that Hamas seemed to have lulled the Israeli government into a sense that they had gone passive, that they were going to change their ways, that they were not going to be pursuing this strategy in the future. And then all of a sudden they did. Is that true, first of all? And, I guess if I would say that, is it possible that movement would ever quiet down and slowly peter up or give out over time?
So there were actually three things at play that really worked well. First was that the majority of conflict was happening on the West Bank. There was a very active history, even immediate history, on the West Bank of Israeli settlers coming into conflict with Palestinians and armed conflict and skirmishes and conflict that was driving attention for the average Israeli into the West Bank, but not into Gaza, because they obviously stand on opposite sides of the country, right? West Bank on the west side, Gaza on the east. The other thing was, you're right, Hamas had done a good job of basically lulling the Israelis to sleep. That's a very strategic military and intelligence term, lulling your opponent to sleep. It's something that intelligence officers are taught when we're in the field. It's something that military officers are taught when they're engaged in active conflict zones. You want to give your opponent a sense of comfort that nothing is going to happen. And then as they have that extended sense of not today, not today, not today, they start to become comfortable. They start to become lazy. They start to change where they direct their resources. Because if they don't have to pay attention to you 24 hours a day, they start paying attention to other things, and you only get 20 hours of attention, and then you get 10 hours of attention, and then you get 2 hours of attention. And that gives you more and more time for planning, plotting, and scheming to execute your goals. If you've heard of, like, this is the fundamental doctrine to a sneak attack. Think through, remember Ukraine and Russia during the counterattack in 2023 in August. Right? The very first successful counterattack that Ukraine had against Russia. They talked about attacking in the south. And they talked and talked about the south. And Russia moved all of its forces to the south, and everybody got focused on the south. And then the actual Ukraine counteroffensive happened in the north. And they took huge swaths of land. It was the same lulling strategy. Make the country, make your opponent think nothing is going to happen in the north. They direct all their resources to the south, and then you attack in the north. A big part of why Ukraine's counteroffensive has failed this most recent time is because they didn't have the same sort of opportunity. Russia got smarter, first of all. And second, Ukraine has been focused on one area, trying to gain back territory in the south. And that's what they communicated. Strategically, that's where the fight has always been in Ukraine. But you can see that the same thing Hamas did in Israel is what led to Ukraine's success against Russia. And it's what's led to conflict all over the world. The idea of a sneak attack really only happens after you have lulled your opponent into a false sense of security.
Right. So
that's why this was never an intelligence failure. Okay. It was always a successful sneak attack.
So Sun Tzu, all warfare is based on deception. And if you even look at Britain here, the reason that D-Day had some success is because they went into Normandy when everyone expected them to go into Calais, because it was the shortest distance. And actually, Patton's army was over there by Calais with these inflatable tanks and pretending like they were massing. And of course, the Germans thought, of course, Patton would lead the charge, and he was a decoy, which is why they were able to hit Normandy. So this is standard operating procedure, happens in business, in warfare, in any situation. Okay, so was there an intelligence failure? Now that you've had time to look or maybe think more about what happened a month ago, what do you conclude?
I still stand by this was a successful sneak attack and not an intelligence failure. And there's a few reasons why. Like, in order for there to be an intelligence failure, there has to be demonstrable proof that the information was known.
Right.
If there was no information that was available to be known, meaning that if Hamas created a secret and kept the secret successfully, then that means that they had all the right compartmentalization, so the intelligence was never something that could be collected, right? It's not an intelligence failure when a secret is successfully kept. That just means that the aggressor did the right thing. They kept control of their secrets. It's only an intelligence failure if the secret is discoverable and then not communicated to the right channels.
Were you impressed with Hamas's attack? And again, even their lack of giving away the intel. I mean, we saw them move with very well-trained forces. We saw them have these kind of pieces of paper they left behind, which maybe was an intelligence failure, talking about how they were going to work. They obviously were well-trained, but then again, the intel didn't go by signals intelligence. It was all passed without that. And I mean, they pulled off, a pretty incredible operation. People compared some of the devastation to 9/11, but you might be able to compare also the surprise to something like 9/11 as well.
It's a major mistake to compare what happened in Israel to 9/11. Totally complete. I mean, I understand that people are doing it, Brian. I understand that the US media has done it. It is a travesty to even try to compare the two things together, right? The scenarios, the situations, the events were completely different. The scale of life lost was completely different. So you can't actually compare these two. It's very convenient to say it, especially when it's the United States. And the United States is so, like, the United States government is so blindly pro-Israel that it benefits them to say, oh, this is Israel's 9/11. And Israel understands that they can do the same thing to the United States. But they're two very, very different exercises. To get to your question, why, was I impressed with Hamas? Absolutely. Hamas came out of the gates on this one with a level of sophistication, coordination, and execution that was unlike anything that Israel had seen from them before. That doesn't mean that Hamas has been, diligently studying and trying to get better. It means that whoever was supporting them in a very intentional way. And that supporter is Iran, without a doubt. Iran supports Hamas and Hamas's work in Palestine against Israel for a number of different reasons. You know that Iran is involved because Hezbollah has also gotten involved and the Houthis have also gotten involved. And both of those, in Yemen and in Lebanon, those are countries with extremist groups that are also supported by Iran. So we know that Iranian funding, Iranian training, Iranian intelligence, Iranian support, all of that was at play in the attack. But then behind Iran, we also have to understand Iran has just joined the BRICS trading bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and the larger contingent that it has grown into in the last year. Iran just signed paperwork to join BRICS in August of this year. So that means not only do they have their own strong economic benefit of being the breadbasket of the Middle East, but now they also have borrowing power and trading relationships with all of the developing nations of the world that stand contrary to the United States. So we're very much seeing a continued escalation of this East versus West idea in this competition, this macro competition for economic power. Hamas is just a proxy. They're just a piece of a much larger puzzle that connects Iran to Hamas and connects the BRICS to Iran and connects Russia and China and all of the major players that stand opposite to the United States.
Man, it's scary how this is going. Iran said that they didn't have knowledge that this attack was happening on the 7th, and I, for some reason, believe them. Do you believe them? It doesn't mean they didn't fund it or help plan it, but do you think it's probably true that they didn't know the exact date, maybe from even an intelligence perspective?
It's very possible that they wouldn't know the exact date because one of the things that's impressive about Hamas's attack is the way it was executed. Specifically, what I'm talking about is the tradecraft that they used to execute it. So you mentioned earlier, Brian, how there was no signals intelligence. In order for there to be signals intelligence, it means that there has to be some piece of critical information that's communicated over an electronic medium that creates a signal, whether that's a walkie-talkie, a radio, a cell phone, a text message. And of course, everybody understands that Israel has one of the most sophisticated signals intelligence apparatuses in the world, right? It not only does it have that over its own people, but it has that across Gaza and the West Bank. So if Hamas wanted to do anything with any hope of success, they had to have a very robust communication strategy to protect any signals intelligence. Well, the best way to get around not getting caught is to simply not use signals. So we're actually dealing with a scenario here where this entire attack could have been coordinated in live conversations where people were literally meeting in street corners on scratched pieces of paper that other people had to burn, or even paper that they would eat or that would dissolve in water. Like, we're talking about old school sticks and bricks, real Cold War era, right? Intelligence and espionage activity. It's fascinating to think that that's what they could have been doing, but then we also have to remember that, all across the world, we're seeing this turn back to old school traditional conflict and war fighting capability. They're digging trenches in Ukraine. If they're digging trenches in Ukraine, we shouldn't be surprised that they're burning secret messages in Palestine. That's just the way of the world now to defeat technology.
Yeah, it's wild to see that. I mean, trenches like World War I in Ukraine. 100 years later, it's wild to watch. Can we zoom out a bit and just tell me what you thought about the brutality of those attacks? Because every time I'm reminded of what happened or I hear scenarios, it's just really hard to hear that and see that in this day and age. And I know there's a lot of pain and suffering around the world, but still that shocks me that was allowed to happen. What do you make of that? And was that part of the point? Were these supposed to be so atrocious so they would get the reaction? And then is this playing out exactly how Iran wanted it to play? And maybe Hamas as well?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think that you're exactly right, Brian. I think that what happened here was it was a calculated play by Iran to support Hamas in a targeted attack that, of course, benefits Hamas's goal and mission. Their mission is to essentially eradicate the Israeli government that is holding the Palestinian people back. So that's their goal, their purpose. That's all they care about. That's all Hamas is focused on. Iran might have different goals. And one of Iran's goals is, of course, to create any kind of scenario in which the West looks like it's incapable or hypocritical in terms of what it tries to police and enforce in terms of democracy and fair play and equality across the world. So Iran knew that an attack by Hamas was going to force Israel to have a response. Hamas knew that they couldn't overrun Israel in one day. There's no way that they were going to cross into Israel, kidnap a few hundred hostages, and then see a transformation that they're looking for. It was not a suicide mission, but it was a very tactical incursion with a limited scope of outcome. They wanted to do something that was going to irritate Israel into making a response, but they knew they weren't going to win the war. What I don't think anybody anticipated, except for just a few of us, was that Israel was going to go so far in terms of the level of response that they carried out. And I think that's what Iran was counting on. Iran wanted to do something that was going to instigate Israel in such a way that Israel's response would be so overboard that the whole world would wake up to the fact that Israel is an oppressor and the United States backs Israel with total and complete hypocrisy to their policies anywhere else in the world. And here we are on November 24th, and that is exactly what's happening in the world. There is outcry across the world about the atrocities that have happened in Gaza at the execution of the Israelis using weapons and training that have been provided by the United States. People are calling it hypocrisy, the way that the United States has supported Israel in their attack against Gaza, but defended Ukraine in the attack from Russia. And why are some people getting funds and other people not getting funds? And how are we allowing 2/3 of all the casualties in Gaza have been women and children? How is the United States supporting that when they won't support the protection of and sanctity of life in other places? It's mind-boggling to see how well this situation, this conflict in the Middle East, has played out in the best interests of China, Russia, Iran, and the growing Eastern Bloc. In fact, we recently saw that the BRICS came out and officially took the side of the Palestinians. So now, in the eyes of the developing world, when they look at this conflict, it is absolutely a conflict where the United States supports Israel in their ongoing systematic execution of civilians, and the BRICS countries support Palestine in their endeavors for freedom and equality.
Okay, but
that's a horrible place to be.
But Andrew, I mean, what is Israel supposed to do? I mean, and again, I might argue that Hamas doesn't care about the Palestinian people, and Iran sure doesn't care about the Palestinian people, because both those organizations are willing to sacrifice millions of them just for their quote-unquote cause. And so what is Israel actually supposed to do? If you were on the ground in Israel, if you were in the government of Israel, would you really be doing something different? Could you honestly tell me that you could do something different based on the reaction of what happened on the 7th?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. So Israel had the opportunity to immediately see what this was for what it was, to see that this was an instigated terrorist plot designed to cause upheaval in Israel and cause upheaval in Israel's relationships with other Western countries. That's what it was. However, the attack happened at a time when Netanyahu was already unpopular among Israelis. So a lot of the reason that the overreaction has been so predictable is because Netanyahu was looking for a reason to highlight an outside enemy, because inside Israel, he was wildly unpopular. He's going through his own legal battles for corruption. You had conflict going on in the West Bank, he was still elected,
so obviously he's powerful enough to get elected, or popular enough to get elected, right?
So yeah, I mean, you can say that, but at the same time, we've got people who are popular enough to get elected in the United States too, and they're still unpopular.
Yeah.
51% is all it takes to be elected. And in a place like Israel, he was only reelected within the last few months after they had gone through two other prime ministers who had all had less than 1 year stints in office.
So what should they have done? Just sat on their hands and said, we're not going to take the bait, even if you slaughter like 1,400 people in the most gruesome manner. We're just going to realize that you're trying to bait us, and we're going to be really stoic. I mean, even I know you didn't want to compare to 9/11, but the U.S. did the terrible job of not overreacting to 9/11 all the way into Afghanistan, all the way into Iraq. So obviously, big nations do that all the time, right?
The United States absolutely overreacted to 9/11 also.
Yeah.
Think about that. I mean, how did anybody feel when we left Afghanistan in 2020-30? Nobody was happy with that decision, right? That's what the exact same thing happened. The United States was baited into carrying out war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that's exactly what we did. And then now you have the UN saying that Israel is carrying out war crimes in Gaza. That is exactly what we were baited into. What could they have done? They could have done exactly what Biden told them to do, right? Biden was like, don't overreact. Use your special forces, use your intelligence infrastructure, use your advanced weapons and your advanced technology, and ferret out the specific threat, rescue your hostages, neutralize key leaders, and cause some kind of disruptive effect in return. Do not turn this into an international tragedy that makes Israel look bad. That was the advice they were given by Western countries immediately after October 7th. But that's not what they chose to do, right? And again, it's easy in hindsight to say this stuff, and it's easy when you're not the corrupted, public-eyed, elected official who's also trying to retain power. There's all sorts of reasons that make it easy to say what they should have done. But we live in a world now where people and countries are provoked to take certain action because everything is so available. There's so much information. It's very hard to keep a secret these days. So when you carry out the serial bombing that kills 13,000 people, when you were only attacked once and you lost 1,300 people, that's not a fair fight. And in the eyes of the world, even in the eyes of the United States, Israel has been losing popularity among Democrats and Republicans as they have continued this systematic process, right? Like, you tell me what you would rather have. Would you rather have the continuing support of a country by taking a more measured approach to an outside threat, or would you rather ostracize all of your support by getting hyper aggressive in your response to a threat? Not to mention that what Netanyahu has claimed and promised he would do is basically impossible. He's promised that he is going to completely eradicate Hamas. It's basically impossible to do that. That is truly a goal that cannot be achieved, because as long as one person believes in the independence of the Palestinian people, essentially you have failed.
So I had Dershowitz on a couple days ago, who obviously has different views than you, and he said some people say you can't eradicate an idea like Hamas. He says, nonsense. We eradicated a concept of Nazism in Germany, is what he said. What do you say to that?
Except that there's neo-Nazis.
Okay, there are, but the Nazi regime in Germany did stop, right?
But Nazism did not.
Okay, but you might just say that there's still no regime there. I don't know. The truth is the situation over there is a mess. You could argue it will always be a mess. And obviously, I'm just as biased and media biased as everybody else in the world who's getting images thrown out in front of them and trying to pick sides. And all I can really realize is that this is a long conflict, something I'll never truly understand, something that happens with people on the ground that have deep religious and historical beliefs. And it's really something. Can it ever be figured out? That's my question to you, Andrew. Can it be figured out? Is there a solution there or not?
Yeah, I mean, if we're asking whether or not there's a solution to peace between Islam and Judaism, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely, there's a plan that can happen. Now, whether or not that means that there's a way that Israel, as a nation state, is going to grant a portion of its geographical footprint to a Palestinian state, that's a completely different thing. And unfortunately, Brian, I think what's really happening is that people are mixing up what the conflict is here.
Yeah.
This is not a conflict about Judaism. You can support Israel without believing that they are, you can support Judaism without supporting Israel. Israel is a state. It's a democratic body. It's a legislative entity. Judaism is a religious faith. You can be anti-Israel without being anti-Semite. But people don't realize that. And instead we get it all jumbled together and we start thinking one is the other and they're two the same things. They're not the same thing. You can support Judaism and the plight of the Jewish people and the suffering that the Jewish people have had. And you can also say Israel is a bunch of bullies. You can absolutely say those two things together, but nobody's willing to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So if you're able to separate the two from each other, then you're able to see that there's a tragedy happening that's being sponsored by a nation state, and it's being claimed as religious vindication, and it's not.
How does this play out? How does this end? Or at least what are the next 12 months like, in your opinion? We just had the ceasefire and the hostages being exchanged today. Also, that's interesting. I'm kind of curious how that works behind the scenes with Qatar, and that must be intelligence. I'll ask you about that, and then how do you think this plays out over the next 12 months?
Unfortunately, it's really difficult to predict, right? Netanyahu has already promised that he's going to continue his bombing raids after this 4-day ceasefire. If that's true, if Israel continues to bomb Gaza, a plot of land with no organized army that is predominantly civilian, then you will continue to see the rest of the world turn against Israel. You will continue to see them decline in popularity in the United States and across Europe, which is happening right now. Okay. It's all in Israel's hands. They get to choose.
But do they care? Does Israel care? They clearly don't if they're losing the popularity contest. It only starts to hurt.
Netanyahu doesn't care.
Right. It only starts to hurt if U.S. pulls funding and support. Then they're in trouble. Otherwise, they're not. Or unless Iran attacks or whatever, then it could get nasty.
Not necessarily, because to your point, Iran is going to be safe harbor for any Hamas leaders that flee Gaza. So that is exactly why Israel is going to fail, because there will always be a contingent of Hamas that have safe havens somewhere in the Middle East.
Qatar.
If not Qatar, they have options in the UAE, they have options in Saudi Arabia, they have options in Iran, right? Somebody will give them safe harbor, just like Taiwan became the safe harbor for the nationalists in China when Mao Zedong took over. There will always be safe harbor, which is why Israel will fail to eradicate Hamas. It's not going to happen. The question becomes, how long will the United States and the West continue to support the killings of Palestinians before we say enough is enough? Oh, you've already seen the United States pull back support in Ukraine, and that took about 24 months. And that was when a legit third-party outside country invaded their territory. It's going to take much less than 24 months before the United States tells Israel that they need to turn a different way. Right? To your point about the hostage negotiation, this hostage negotiation is a fantastic example of how Israel is not nearly as audacious as they claim to be. Qatar and the United States handled negotiations between Israel and Hamas. What does that tell us? First of all, Brian, does the United States negotiate with terrorists?
Apparently, supposedly no.
Supposedly, it is a firm policy that we do not. However, the United States is negotiating with Hamas. So what does that tell us? Hamas is not.
Or the U.S. always negotiates with terrorists, either way.
Exactly. So it gets ugly, dude. It gets really ugly. And that's not a place that an outgoing president competing for re-election, it's not where he wants to be. And it for sure as hell is not the place where a new incoming president wants to start his term or her term.
Okay. So this recent hostage deal hurts the U.S. even more. Because they're negotiating with these people.
And now once they have gone to the negotiating table with Hamas, it verifies that Hamas is its own entity. It brings to question whether or not they are really terrorists. And it shows that Israel is being kept in check. by the United States. So it's an all-around win for Hamas and for the powers in the East. It's an all-around loss for Israel and the United States. And they're getting 50 hostages out of it, out of 250 more that are not.
Yeah, I was like, I thought it was going to be a couple hundred or 100, and it was like 15, right?
Yeah.
Although who knows how many are still alive from the others. So, all right, I appreciate that. To wrap the Israeli conflict up, is there anything we didn't touch besides all of that? Saudi was about to sign, well, not about to, but they were the next to sign the Abraham Accords. Probably a little ways from that. This supposedly is going to push it back even further. Saudi made a joint statement with Iran recently that Israel should stop. But does this affect that long-term relationship with Saudi in the region?
Oh, well, it affects the relationship between Saudi and Israel.
Right.
Remember, the Abraham Accords are all about bringing proximity between Muslim countries and Israel in the region.
Yeah.
And they had success with Bahrain, they had success with UAE, and they were seeking success with Saudi. Saudi is the largest, wealthiest of all the Khaliji Arab countries. So to have success with Saudi would have been a big deal. This event prevented the agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia, which of course had major impact to slow Israel's reach across the Muslim world. And it also demonstrated that the Palestinian conflict and the Palestinian oppression in Israel is still very much something that the Israelis are not willing to let go of yet, which send a message to all Sunni Muslims throughout all of the Middle East that Israel still sees Sunni Muslims and Islam as a whole as less than Judaism, which just further aggravates a long-running fire.
But do the Saudis really care about the Palestinians? Does anyone in that region really care about the Palestinians? Or do they just have to be shown publicly to support them because they're their brothers in religion? But they can't truly care about them. No one's willing to take them. I saw, of course, it was a PragerU, so I'll take that with a grain of salt, report about how, after the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, they expelled hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. Multiple nations have expelled them in the past. I mean, it's just convenient sometimes to support them, but they're not necessarily caring about the people in these regions, are they?
Yeah, I would say quite the opposite.
Really?
I would say that in the Muslim world, they care very much about Palestinians, and it is very much an egregious atrocity what has happened between the Israelis and the Muslims.
They don't care enough for them to come live in their countries, though, do they?
So why would they let them in their countries, Brian?
I don't know.
So the reason that Jordan and Egypt specifically will not let Palestinians come in is because as soon as Israel gets the Palestinians out of Israel, they're never going to let them come back. There is no hope for a two-state solution.
That's why.
So if Jordan and Egypt actually allow the Palestinians to take refuge in their own Muslim countries, Israel just conveniently got an entire country of only Israelis.
That's the only reason. Jews. That's the only reason. Otherwise, they would lovely welcome them in.
Well, there's economic reasons and stuff too. You can snicker and snap. You can laugh about it all you want. But the truth is,
I don't think that's the only reason, Andrew. I think there's a ton of economic reasons and a ton of other reasons they wouldn't want to welcome a bunch of refugees in. So
yeah, absolutely. But your question was, do they actually care about the Palestinians? In the eyes of the Muslim world, the only people protecting Mecca are the only people who have the ability to actually protect the homeland, right? Is the Palestinian people. Everybody else, that's why that's why the holy city is actually split in half between where the Muslims are allowed to live and where the Jews are allowed to live.
Oh, so if Mecca,
if Israel is taken over,
Jerusalem?
Yeah, correct. Mecca's in Saudi, excuse me.
Yeah, Jerusalem. Okay.
Jerusalem, thank you. But so if they were to actually leave, if there were to be no Muslim presence in Jerusalem, then the whole Muslim world has lost access to one of their own holy cities.
Yeah, and then you can go down the line of, you can go down the line of Jerusalem being, held to have like the king of Jordan to have, access over the mosque and all of these things. I don't know. One thing I'll agree with is it's a big old mess, and I'll never fully understand it. And yeah, that's one of the things I conclude. And you're right. It mixes religions and states, and depending on how convenient it is, you mix them. And Netanyahu was great about that. Netanyahu said, you can't be anti-Zionist without being anti-Semitic. So he loves to mix them because it's a great way to get his point across. And then other people will say, no, they're completely separate pieces. And so, yeah, it's been hard to watch. I was in Israel in 2018 to shoot a documentary with a former guest. And so I was there. And so it's just weird to watch it all happen after being there, and yeah, it's been really sobering. You mentioned Ukraine. Just quickly, from a media standpoint, Ukraine has taken the back page. And how much of a factor is that alone of not being on the attention of Americans or people worldwide mean that they have had a subsequent decrease in funding?
So I don't think the decrease in funding is less tied to their being on the back page of media.
Okay.
When we were together last year, we talked about how the Western world would tire of supporting Ukraine.
Yeah.
And we also talked about how Ukraine had its own issues with corruption that nobody was acknowledging. Remember that conversation?
Yeah.
Well, all of their issues with corruption became very apparent in the last 12 months. So they had a new minister of defense because their previous minister of defense was corrupt. They just turned over within the last few weeks their head of cybersecurity because their head of cybersecurity was under corruption charges, right? So like all that money that was pumped into Ukraine in the first 18 months of the war, people are now willing to publicly acknowledge it has disappeared and they can't account for it. They don't know where it's gone. And plenty of people have gotten rich and the black market is thriving. So now that is the biggest part of why Europe and the United States have lost interest in continuing to fund. Because not only has it resulted in inflation and issues, economic issues and otherwise in Ukraine, in the US and Europe, not only has it hurt us to help Ukraine, but now Ukraine hasn't been able to deliver on the counteroffensive they wanted to deliver on and is actually showing that they have and acknowledging their own corruption issues. That does not lend for a bright future for what they're trying to accomplish by solely existing off of the generosity of other countries.
Now, politically, it was originally a strong move for Biden to back this government. He was seen as a supporter of oppression against Russia, funneling the money in. I'm sure his approval rating went up. But now it's hurting him by continuing to soar because of the corruption, because of the exhaustion that the American people are having, the comparison that people are making of all the money going there and the money not going to Maui or the money not going to these other places. And so will you see Biden slowly back away from that as the election comes up?
I see him backing. I see Biden being very forward in his rhetoric and blaming Congress.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real. And he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy. I'm looking for partners, collaborators, colleagues who want to join forces with me around the globe and create real value, generational wealth, and financial freedom for everyone else around the world. Get involved in the cryptocurrency markets, get involved in the NFT markets. This is your moment. Life all comes down to a few moments. Don't let this pass. Now it's not too late. Next year's going to be too late. Ultimately, this is about freedom. That's the way I see it. This is about giving power back to the people and enabling billions of people worldwide to use the financial markets to improve their lives and those of their friends and their families and their communities. Honestly, I think it's a violation of human rights not to allow people basic access to financial services. Because right now people are being kept in the dark, they're being robbed of education, and it's a travesty. And so I'm looking for people that want to join me and be a part of this solution. And that all happens inside the DeFi Academy. The gains my students are making are absolutely amazing. Double, triple digit gains in the first month alone. That's amazing. This will change your life. Now is the time to get involved. I'm going to tell you exactly how my students in my academy made money in the last 30 days. I'm talking about real trading results. And let me just whet your appetite a little bit. Let me hit you with some numbers. I'm talking Brendan from New Zealand is up 68.77% on the month. Steve from Europe up 83%. Albert in Singapore up 169.9% on one single trade. I got Susan up 153% on her call options alone, also rocking 139% returns and 442% returns as well on individual trades. These are people that are changing their financial future in the last 30 days, but it's based on trading discipline.
I've graduated over 500 students from inside my academy from over 54 countries around the world. It's amazing. When it comes to crypto, DeFi, and blockchain, we love this space. We truly believe it's the future. This is down to our core. It's authentic to what we're doing, and everybody can tell through the camera because you can't make this stuff up.
If you're watching me now, wherever you are, I implore you, take 60 seconds right now and join my academy. Apply today. Now you've got a chance. Life all comes down to a few moments. What are you going to do? What's the choice that you're going to make? Most people will never see this opportunity. Dubai luxury transformation projects have historically delivered 40 to 90% annual returns. That is incredible. These were once reserved only for insiders with access. I spent 15 years on Wall Street and I learned this. The biggest returns always go to the people who get the call first. Now, you finally can. We've just received a brand new project with major upside potential. Allocations move fast. Click the link, apply now, and speak to my team. This is your chance to see what others never will.